It's unbelievable what they're doing in the streets there. People are pissed. They do not want to go back to Russia. They want to continue their direction going towards the West.
They want to join the EU and be integrated, and they're accusing the government of being authoritarian, Moscow, puppet-related government.
It's just been a disaster. The CIA is backing a group that's fighting another group that's backed by another one of our government agencies. So it's like the highlight of U.S. taxpayer waste, which is we're arming two different groups that are fighting each other. You know, the taxpayers paying it for at the end of the day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner, and I'm here with my co-host, Cody Shirk. What's up, Cody? How's it going in Florida, man?
I am freezing my butt off right now. We got mid-50s here. We got a crisis. I saw a meme last night where it showed the 300 fighter with a sword with a Category 5 hurricane coming. And then it showed like 50-degree temperatures in Florida and just everybody like running for cover and just totally being big wusses. And that's exactly how I feel right now.
I mean, you're a Southern California and Floridian.
Yeah, I left California because it was too cold for me. That's how how sensitive to the temperature. But you were double jacketed before we started recording, and you've got
double jacket. I mean, it's like 30 degrees up here, and it is hilarious. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. When the winter hits, you kind of know what to do. My wife is from Northern California, from Santa Cruz, and she is just like, what do I do? Like, how do I stay warm? Because when we first moved to Oregon, she just would dress like she was in Santa Cruz every single day. Like a sweatshirt, that's all you basically need year round in Santa Cruz. Maybe a little bit warmer in the wintertime. But yeah, we're getting used to the weather. I'm showing her the ropes.
Do you have a thermometer in your little studio there? What do we got inside your studio?
Inside the studio, I would say I got a heater in here. So
okay.
When I came out at 5:30 this morning, it was definitely 30 degrees. Now it's probably like 40 something like that.
I don't see your breath. I don't see you like fogging a mirror. So that's not too bad.
No. I'm excited for today's episode. There's a lot of stuff going on. And first, I want to just kind of welcome all of our new listeners. If you have not listened to this podcast, you're coming back to the second episode. We're excited to have you here. We want to dive in today and kick it off. There's a lot on the global plate right now. A lot of changes happened in the last week. So let's kind of dive in here, and I want to talk a little bit about Syria and what's happened in Syria over the last really week. Longer than that, but there's some big big things happened over the last week. So let me kick it off, give kind of a rundown. So a big rebel offensive happened over the last week. November 27th, some rebel forces led by the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, launched a surprise attack from the Idlib province, and they advanced into some of the neighboring areas. And what they did, this advance moved all the way back into Aleppo. So if you remember back in the previous, when the conflict was escalated back in like 2016, they had Aleppo. Then they lost it, and now they're back in, and they've taken over the second largest city in Syria. So this is the first time since 2016 that any opposition forces have secured Aleppo. At least 500 civilians and military personnel died during this round of fighting. And it's very interesting because this rebel coalition, they're called the Military Operations Command. It's got a wide range of groups. So we're talking, you've got Islamist hardliners to moderates, combined with U.S.-backed militias, all moving in and kind of securing ground and taking ground, exploiting this power vacuum that's left by the Russians focused on what's happening in Ukraine and in Iran. So a lot has changed. We can even post a little map. You can see how the We'll show kind of how the terrain has changed and who's taken over what. Cody, no one was really talking about Syria a couple weeks ago. Now it's back in the news. Why does this matter? What is interesting about this for you?
It matters. I got to get better at answering your questions directly. I've realized that. So it matters because it shows the world's order shifting in real time. And this opposition force, which is the rebels coming from the north, coming into Aleppo, this is really the first kind of challenge or first really uprising since 2016. So we're talking 9 years now. And this is a perfect example of the larger world order changing. And this is like the conversation we had with Sean McFate, which is this return to general like factions of different powers around the world instead of one big superpower, the US. And this Syria example is a perfect example of this unfolding in real time. Now, that said, if you want to talk about confusing geopolitics and confusing like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, this is probably one of the most confusing geopolitical situations. Actually, I can't think of a more confusing one. This is the number one example for how you get confused in geopolitics. So just really high level, you've got Turkey supporting one group. You've got Russia and Iran supporting Assad, who is the president. I'm using air quotes in that. The president of Syria. I'm using air quotes because there's a huge push to get him out. And also people don't think he's really the elected leader. Then you've got the US, who is occupying eastern parts of Syria and backing the Kurds. The Kurds are another ethnic group that actually span across Syria, Iraq, Iran, and into Turkey. And then you have a variety of different radical Islamic religious jihad groups that are fighting on all kinds of different initiatives and areas of the country. And then you have Israel occupying a small piece of land at the bottom part of Syria. And then you have the Iranian-backed groups like Hamas and Hezbollah somewhat interacting through there and transporting arms through Syria to get to Lebanon. And on top of all of that, you have the big picture, which is Russia and the US and Iran and Turkey somewhat fighting a proxy war within Syria. And I just made it more confusing than what we just explained. But this, I feel horrible for the Syrians, first of all, because you have Christian Syrians in there, you have Muslim Syrians in there, you have all kinds of different groups within the country. And Syria's like ground zero for everybody to go fight for all different kinds of reasons. It's insane.
Totally. I mean, there's also, we were talking about the US backed groups. I think it's called the Free Syrian Army. I believe that's the US backed one, or one of the US backed ones. And they were there mostly, quote, to like fight against ISIS. And now things are just completely shifted. And one thing I will say is it seems like a bad week for Russia. And I don't know how this is going to play out, but we had Sean McFate on the podcast. He talks about these like dumpster fire warfare, basically going to places that are, let's just say, not as established or not as secure of a nation state, and then the U.S. lighting up some dumpster fire type turmoil on the border of a country like Russia or China. Yeah, this is a very interesting conflict because the Russians effectively, I mean, they're sending jets right now, and they're responding, and they're backing Bashar al-Assad and his forces, but they've got a lot of conflicts going on as well, just like the U.S. So,
but I think it's tempting to look at winners and losers here, because when you look at a war, like who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, or who's winning, who's losing, what are they fighting for, and that's why it's so complicated, because it's not really clear who is fighting for what. But high level, because we're in this time period where the U.S. is in this lame duck, 45 days, 30 days that we have left.
Yeah.
Where we have an outgoing president, incoming president, who have completely different geopolitical and foreign affair priorities. So you can make an argument that Turkey, Erdogan is making a push. He's backing the rebels to push into Aleppo, because he doesn't want the Syrian war to continue to spill over into Turkey. And remember, Turkey has over 3 million Syrian refugees. So they want the Syrian refugees in Turkey to go back to Syria. And part of Turkey's motivation is to push that back and get Aleppo taken back over away from Assad and that regime. And then you've got Russia and Iran, who actually are probably the big losers here because they've spent so much time and money in Syria, and both both Iran and Russia are losing ground in Syria, even though it's not really their ground. The ground that's being lost is Assad's ground. And then the U.S. actually is probably the biggest winner here because the U.S. is kind of like hands off. We're not really doing anything, even though we probably are. But
we were dumping $1 billion a year in arming these rebel groups. I think we armed multiple rebel groups.
Yep. And by the way, there's actually a New York Times article. We should throw this up here, where it says the CIA is backing a group that's fighting another group that's backed by another one of our government agencies. So it's like the highlight of U.S. taxpayer waste, which is we're arming two different groups that are fighting each other, and we're the taxpayers paying it for it at the end of the day. But I want to mention one more thing. There's one more component that no one ever talks about, which is the ConocoPhillips gas fields, which are in Syria as well, in the eastern part of the country, which a lot of people say that's why the U.S. forces there are to protect this U.S. company operating in the country. And I guess, it's a big dumpster fire everywhere. And to go back on what that episode was, 2 episodes ago, we had Sean McFate talking about these dumpster fires where countries intentionally light these dumpster fires in different regions of the world. And it's just an analogy of saying, hey, we're going to make this little event happening. It's this fire in a trash can when in real, bigger picture, it's not that big of a deal, but it's a big distraction to the bigger picture of what's going on. And these multiple dumpster fires in Syria is exactly what many Turkey, U.S., Iran, they all want this to be going on right now. It's
definitely something we'll keep monitoring, and interesting. I want to move to another quote dumpster fire in Georgia. I'm not going to call it a dumpster fire necessarily because we don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I'm going to, right now, there are massive protests in Tbilisi. We'll put up a little video. I saw a tweet that the streets of Tbilisi look like a scene from the Star Wars Clone Wars. They are firing like bottle rockets out of a trash can, and it's insane. So there's thousands and thousands of people on the streets. They're protesting, and I'll give kind of a rundown of what happened. So there's an election in October that was heavily contested. Now, there's a ruling party called the Georgian Dream Party, and they claimed victory in a disputed parliament election. I think it was 54% is what they said. And this was widely seen as a referendum on EU membership, meaning that there's been a push to join the EU from Georgia. Georgia has been largely a Russian vassal state. It's been part of the Soviet bloc, gained independence, but has followed Russia in many ways. They're very closely connected, and also have their differences. As when you're there's barbed wire, and the difference, the lineup between the Russians and the Georgia, the border is contested. So anyway, the protest began November 28th. So the prime minister announced that they'd be taking a 3-year delay in any talks about joining the EU, citing some, quote, blackmail from the EU. When this happened, the president broke with the ruling party, even though the president wasn't fully part of the Georgian Dream Party. They'd been endorsed by the Georgian Dream Party and sided with the protesters. Apparently, 80% of Georgians support the EU integration, and this kicked off this firestorm. And in the streets, there are thousands and thousands of protesters out there, and they want to join the EU and be integrated, and they're accusing the government of being authoritarian, Moscow puppet-related government. So, Cody, I know you've dove into this a little bit. Why are we covering this? Why is this interesting for the investor here in the U.S.?
It's just another example of further fractioning off of different power areas of the world. And Georgia has been leaning more towards the west the past several years. In fact, Tbilisi has been a pretty popular digital nomad destination.
It's a beautiful city. Beautiful city.
They have westernized banking in the sense that it was actually a pretty good area for people from the west to go open up bank accounts and do business there. And Russia behind the scenes has gone, not so fast. We're not going to have this. We're not having you take one of our former, like you said, vessel states and take it over. And behind the scenes here of what this election is and who's getting paid off and the politicians who are leaning back towards Russia, you can definitely see that Russia's trying to pull back Georgia. And that's why people are pissed there. That's what, I think we got to show this video of the fireworks shooting off, and someone remixed it. So there's like a DJ song on it and it looks like they're in a rave. I mean, I don't want to laugh at it because it's not funny, but at the same time, it's unbelievable what they're doing in the streets there. People are pissed. They do not want to go back to Russia. They want to continue their direction going towards the west.
Well, they just want to go to the EU. Yeah, they want to be. They were told that they were going to join the EU, and then it's flipped, and people are pissed off.
The bait and switch.
Yeah, and then so you got the Georgian Dream Party saying that all of this is being instigated by outsiders, by the West. They're stoking up these paid protesters. It's kind of like the old playbook of, you're doing this, we're doing this. It's like the finger pointing thing. We're all pointing at each other. Very, very interesting. And yeah, I don't know where it goes from here. I know there's been a lot of talk about Georgian real estate, and when things like this happen, who knows how it's going to play out. It's like often the talk about Georgian real estate was it was so cheap. You can go over there and buy a bunch of apartment complexes that are beautiful, and it really is. It's a beautiful European feeling city, but
maybe that's why it was cheap.
Chaos and conflict.
That's why it was cheap.
I mean, you never really know, because you look at like what was happening in the U.S. a couple of years ago. It looked just like this, in Chicago and all over. So we'll see where it goes. I'm quite interested. Let's shift one more to what is happening in Benin and in Africa. So this is something you've been following. Give kind of a rundown. What's brewing in Benin?
So I read this press release from the DoD yesterday, and it was a press release that just seemed so obscure that I had to dive into it. And it says, Acting Under Secretary of Defense for Policy, Miss Amanda Dory travels to Benin and Cote d'Ivoire. And I was like, why the heck are we going over there to these tiny African nations? And in my head, I kind of know the geography. And I was like, well, these countries are right next to the Sahel region, which is what we've been talking about for a while, which is Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso getting overthrown in coups that have been backed by the Russian government. And the Wagner Group has been in this area of Africa to, I'm using air quotes, help these countries fight off Islamic extremists. Obviously, there's a whole backstory there. So immediately my antenna kind of perk up. I'm like, oh, I see what's happening here. The U.S. is worried that Russia is moving into Benin. So then I started digging into that, and I just found all of this information that relates to the Wagner Group being active on the border of northern Benin. And Benin happens to be a pretty strong democracy, or historically has over the past couple of decades in this part of Africa. So the French...
So give some context. Where is Benin?
Benin is on the... how do I say this? It's on the western part of Africa.
The Horn of Africa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They call it...
No.
The Guinea Gulf. The horn's on the other side.
Guinea Gulf.
Yeah.
Okay, Guinea Gulf.
So it's like on the west side of Africa, and it's one of those tiny countries that's stacked together with Togo and Benin, and it's right next to Nigeria and that whole region. And again, the country's very small, so it's not really super relevant as it pertains to like huge amounts of resources or anything like that. But it's strategically located, and it has been a democracy for the past several decades. So the French, well, it's also French speaking. The French have been super active there. The U.S. has, and the EU in general. So the U.S. and the French are currently in Benin trying to push back Russia. I'm not saying like literally, there's no war being fought there. It's just very much diplomacy. At the same time, though, Benin politicians have been in Russia talking with Russia to strengthen their ties. So there's this fight over Benin right now. And you're not going to.
What is happening in the Sahel region? You've talked. You referenced it. We've talked about it on previous podcasts. Give some context.
So the Sahel region is this area of Africa. You can look on a map. It's Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and then into Chad. This whole region is very, very resource rich. You got gold, you have rare earth metals, you have uranium, and there's been this war going on there for the past several years. Some of it a hot war, but also a war of influence. And what has gone on traditionally is the French have mostly controlled this area, and then in partnership with the US, there's been all kinds of materials exploited out of this area of the world. And the French have gotten a lot of their uranium out of there to power their power plants in France. France runs on 80% nuclear power, so it's very strategic for them to have access to uranium. And the US has gotten a lot of gold and other materials out of this area just because the French and the US are pretty strong allies politically. Over the past 3 years, the Wagner Group has gone in there and overthrown all three of those governments, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. And gold mines and uranium mines and all kinds of resource mines have been taken away from Western companies by the governments of these three countries that are really military dictatorships right now. And Russia has been taking a lot of the gold from these gold mines and exporting it back to Russia to get around a lot of the sanctions that have been imposed on them since 2022. It's important to note, though, that this trend started just prior to the Ukrainian war, which means that Russia very much anticipated that they would be getting sanctions, and they knew that they'd have to be stacking gold. So they were making plays throughout Africa, in Venezuela, and pretty much all around the world to get access to gold in anticipation for these sanctions to be brought upon them. And they've used gold to settle a lot of trade arrangements with other countries that they're dealing with. That was a lot right there. Is that, was that a good wrap up?
Makes sense. Yeah. That's a good wrap up. That's a good wrap up. So U.S. is over there, and this is kind of is this kind of like the stopgap where they're like, it's at the edge of the region and they're like, well, let's keep this from, let's create influence here so they don't continue to push further.
Exactly. It's exactly what's happening. And I think over the past 4 years, I don't want to point a finger at Biden and his foreign policy, but there's no other way to say it. It's just been a disaster. It's been a disaster for the U.S. We've lost power and influence pretty much on every corner of the world. I'm not saying that the U.S. has traditionally been in the right when it comes to influence and power. I'm just saying we're just losing it left and right. And this is just another example of the U.S. getting pushed out. Back to the Sahel region really quickly. The U.S. built a $100 million drone base in Niger, and it was taken away from us this past year. And the news didn't really cover it all. The Russians now operate it. So that's an example of the U.S. investing all this money in this region of the world and then just like literally getting pushed out, just go away. They're telling us, and the US is like, okay, fine, we'll just go away. So right now, again, this lame duck period before Trump comes into office, we have these diplomats going all around the world, including Benin right now, to go talk to these African leaders. But I don't know what's going to happen here, but it's just an example that trying to say, please, pretty please do this or do that, like it just doesn't work. And we're getting pushed around all over the world.
Well, we'll see what happens. I really don't have I don't believe that it's going to stop and change and that there's going to be a lot of focus on these areas. I think there's going to be significantly less focus on these areas. And I think that's probably a good thing. It's like, if you're going to focus on it, but don't spend money and then not focus on it and lose it. So
yeah, I'm with you too. By the way,
see.
personally, my personal opinion on this is like, good. Like we should not be getting involved in all this stuff. I know traditionally we do need resources and we do need trade, but a lot of these entanglements, especially in Africa, has cost the U.S. way more money than we've actually received in return in terms of trade or resources or whatnot. And so this is an example of like, hey, maybe we should just like get the hell out of there and not worry about that. Let's focus on the things that are important and where we're not wasting money and people's lives too. That's probably the most important part.
Let's focus. Let's move our focus to something that really is important, and most of our listeners will probably be really into it. Get to the crypto markets, because crypto markets are
ripping,
going wild. They're ripping again. They're continuing to rip, and it's interesting because if you talk about the crypto markets, and people always talk about these cycles, right? They talk about Bitcoin. They talk about what happens after Bitcoin goes. Then you've got altcoin, alternative coin season, and those start to move. And so the last week, a lot of the action in these alternative coins have been coins that were popular in previous cycles. They're called dino coins in the crypto, meme space. So let's kind of run through. Let's start with XRP or Ripple. XRP is up 80%. I think maybe even a little bit more than that today.
I had to look at my phone right now just to watch it in real time. It's up huge.
Yeah, it's up huge in the last week. Cardano, Tron, Link, Hedera, and Litecoin have all they're all massive. Walk us through like what happened with XRP. XRP is number third in market cap right now, behind BTC and ETH. Give us kind of a rundown. What is Ripple? When did it launch, and why is this happening?
Ripple was launched in 2012, so it's an OG crypto.
It really
currency.
is.
It's been through the ringer with reputation. I would say that on one hand, the doubters or the haters of Ripple think it's a very centralized and controlled cryptocurrency, which goes against everything.
Think about the point of it. The point is like it's very good at the whole use case is that it's a very good coin for like remittances, right? Sending money.
Yes, because it's quick. It's can do like lots of transactions per second. It's inexpensive compared
it's like
to
a banking coin. Yeah,
correct. But the big pushback is that we already have that in traditional currency markets. We already have that ability to wire money from one country to another. Yes, Ripple would be a little bit cheaper. What I was going to say is that the concern with Ripple is that it's very centralized in the sense that it's controlled, whereas these other.
And what's the downside of that?
The downside is that then we go back to regular currencies where they can be manipulated and controlled, and perhaps if you're holding Ripple and something goes wrong, you all of a sudden can't transfer it. Whereas Bitcoin, that's the whole point of Bitcoin, is decentralized. You have the ability to make transactions without anybody saying you can or can't do that. And the supply is controlled with Bitcoin. Now, the supply is controlled with Ripple. There is a known total amount, but the rate at which they're released and also the idea that perhaps they could dilute the market again with more Ripple is what a lot of the critics say is a problem with Ripple. Also, I just want to point out, Ripple's been around for 12 years now? They were launched in 2012. So they're very old in terms of some of their tech, especially compared to some of the newer blockchains like Solana or Sui. But the run up in Ripple over the past week is another concern that the critics have, and I do too. I'm going to show a chart here. We'll overlay a chart while I'm talking. The upward movement of Ripple is parabolic. It's
insane.
It's straight wall up. And if you look at any stock market, anytime you see something move like this, that's not natural. You should have slow growth or at least sustainable growth. And the reason why it's even more alarming is because in the past, if you look at the chart, there was a previous one of these straight up moves and then it went straight down afterwards. And so
2017, end of 2017 as well.
Yeah.
Spiked up to over 3.
Will it go higher right now? I mean, it might go really high, but will it come crashing down? I would not be shocked if it comes right back down again. And so on one hand, like my investor side of me is just like, don't pay attention to this. Don't get involved. This is how you lose money. But my other side of me is like, well, if you can make money, you can make money. And I think that's what a lot of people are thinking right now who are pumping this. Just like, well, get it while it's hot, make some money while you can, and get out while you can as well.
For sure. I think there's also another side of it, which is, when people want to get involved with cryptocurrencies, let's just say that you're like a more average investor, you haven't been following cryptocurrencies, you don't really want to get involved with meme coins because it's like, do I really want to go buy like fart or Doge? Like it's like Dogecoin or fart coin or all these coins that are moving. XRP has, in my opinion, an illusion of, it is more legit and some of these other coins, and it's been through these lawsuits. They fought and won a bunch of lawsuits, so it seems like it's more legit. My opinion as well is XRP is not going anywhere except up and then straight back down. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be
Get it
fair,
while
you're
it's
right.
hot.
You're
Yeah.
right. They do have many more agreements or like partnerships with companies. It's more of a utility coin. It's been proven over the past decade that Ripple really is trying to be a business, but that's also the counterpoint to it all. Crypto diehards are the whole point of having crypto is to not have it decentralized, not have this oversight. But anyway, the other coin that's interesting is Litecoin. Litecoin is also one of the first cryptos, and I think a lot of people were into Litecoin. Litecoin came out before Solana, before all these kind of alt-play ones. And Litecoin is literally like the light of Bitcoin. So you got your whatever Bud Light, Miller Lite, your Coors Light. This is like the light of that. And it's performed like pretty badly compared to Bitcoin, but it popped this past week and it's up close to like 40% right now. And this is one of those examples of the downer coin. So maybe we truly are an altcoin season. But if you compare Litecoin's performance, especially compared to some of the newer L1s, it's not even close. We got Link up 36%. Sui's been up almost 500% for the year. Hedera is up 142% in the past 7 days. And again, this is one of the reasons why people get so obsessed with crypto is you can make a lot of money in a very short amount of time.
Very, very quickly.
But be careful.
This altcoin season. So just for some context, right? There's been many cycles with Bitcoin. I think this is the fourth cycle, I believe. And there's a cycle theory, and the cycle theory is that Bitcoin moves in cycles. It will go up and then go down. It will kind of establish a new level and then go up, go down, establish a new level, support, and go up. And that in the cycles, typically, Bitcoin leads the market. So Bitcoin moves first, and it goes up first, and then the money bleeds out of Bitcoin and is then used to purchase these altcoins, these coins that are smaller market cap, maybe more speculative assets. And so the cycle theory is that you follow Bitcoin. When it stops moving, you shift your money into these altcoins, and then you make money from Bitcoin, and then you make money from the altcoins, and then you get out before it crashes.
And when the get out is important too, because the get out is either you go to a stable coin like USDC or Tether, or you go back into Bitcoin, meaning, okay, say you took some profits out of Bitcoin, put it into Sol, year up, whatever, 100, 200%, you put it back into Bitcoin. So that's where we could have another Bitcoin leg up next year with a blow off top. And I think that's important for investors who are just getting into the crypto markets to know that there's people here that are very smart and know how to make money and time these cycles very well. And the idea that Bitcoin's going to crash from here or chop along for a while, like we could have a pullback in Bitcoin as people focus on these altcoins, but get ready for another blow off top as people scramble from the exits for the altcoins and go back into Bitcoin.
And that's really the big fear with crypto is that you make money in Bitcoin, you make money in altcoins, and then the altcoins go to zero and you lose everything. And that
full
is
roller coaster ride.
The full roller coaster. All right, crypto markets. Let's move to some interesting stuff happening in the U.S. politics, and we've been following this. We'll dive in here. Cover the couple of top things this week. So really, the biggest one that's causing the most feathers to be ruffled is Biden pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. After months, potentially years of saying that he wasn't going to do this, before the end of his term, he unconditionally pardoned Hunter Biden for his crimes and potential crimes. So unconditional pardoning. He gave some interesting reasonings too. So the reasons he said that Hunter was selectively and unfairly prosecuted due to being his son. He said that the charges against Hunter arose only after his political adversaries in Congress initiated them to undermine Biden and challenge his election. He said that raw politics has tainted this process, resulting in a miscarriage of justice. And he said that no reasonable person examining the facts could conclude otherwise, that Hunter was targeted solely because he's his son. And they said that they were trying to break Biden by targeting Hunter because Hunter is an addict. So he gave the speech, gave reasons. Cody, do you think he should have pardoned Hunter?
And there's always like these like if, ands, or buts and exceptions to the rule. So first of all, if I was president and my son, I had the ability to pardon my son from something, like I would do it 100%. I think what people are really getting stuck on is the fact that he kept saying he was going to not do it. So he lied to the public for like years. And there's like these mashup videos that you can watch of multiple times his press secretary, him saying it, multiple representatives of Biden saying he's not going to pardon him. He's not going to pardon him. I mean, like it's almost a joke.
And saying that doing it would be bad.
Yeah. And then he does
for America.
it. And it's on one hand, it's no surprise to me. And again, I'm like, you know what? I get it. But this is a really bad way for him to leave office. This is just another kind of mark on his record of just like the public being like, what the hell, dude? Like you totally burned us. You lied to us. It doesn't feel good. Now, as far as Hunter goes, I mean, come on. The guy's like literally filmed himself smoking crack with like underage girls, like some pretty crazy stuff. And
I don't know if they're underage.
Really? I've seen pictures of it. Maybe they're like photoshopped or something.
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, you're talking about like, well, he's got his sex with prostitutes.
Yeah.
And then the underage girls separate.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm not saying he's having sex with underage girls. I'm saying there's some pictures. I'm not going to, we're not going to post them here, but they're just like weird pictures. You're like, dude, what are you doing?
Totally.
It's just like bizarre. And anytime you see a guy with just, it's not like one or two pictures or one or two videos. It's a lot of them. And you go like, this guy's got some serious issues here. So I do think that it's not surprising, but this excuse of, oh, my son's been unfairly targeted. The day it happened, Eric Trump posted something on X saying, you know, I've been subpoenaed over 100 times. So are you saying that Hunter is getting more attacked than say Eric Trump or Donald Trump or you know, Donald Trump Jr. is? And I don't want to take sides here. I'm just saying it's like you're rolling the pig with the mugs. You get dirty. Like
there's been a bunch of also, you know, saying that no reasonable person examining the facts could conclude that he was targeted solely. Otherwise, that he was targeted just because it was Biden's son. That's completely false. There's been judges on both sides saying that the stuff is legit. I think it's interesting because it's pissed off a lot of people on the right and the left. And it's pissed off a lot of people on the left because one, he said he wasn't going to do it. And two, kind of lose moral high ground because it's not like Trump had a gnarly pardon as well. Trump pardoned Kushner's dad, Charles Kushner, in January 2021. And Kushner's dad, Charles Kushner, he, interesting dude, he pleaded guilty to witness tampering, tax evasion, making illegal campaign contributions, and he actually spent 2 years in jail for these illegal campaign contributions. But what went down was while he was being investigated, he found out that his brother-in-law was working with the feds against him. So he hired a prostitute, and he arranged this prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law, who then he set up a hidden camera in a hotel room in New Jersey, recorded it, and then sent the footage to his sister, who is his brother-in-law's wife. This whole idea was to intimidate his brother-in-law and dissuade him from working with the federal prosecutors. It did not work. It actually backfired and led to him spending 2 years in prison in 2005. So Trump pardoned him in 2021, got him out of jail. Now Trump is sending him as the ambassador to France. So my take on all of this is what Biden did was pretty bad. What Trump did, pardoning Kushner, was bad. But Biden pardoning Hunter Biden just completely loses any argument that they have the moral high ground and that they're doing better, quote, politics than the Republicans. And yeah, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good.
If anybody has ever seen Game of Thrones or you've never watched Game of Thrones, go back and watch it again, but pretend that the main characters are different political personalities. And when you think of Game of Thrones that way, and you watch the show, and there's all this like drama with who's having sex with who, and who's murdering who, and who's backstabbing who, it's identical to today's political scene around the world. And it seems ridiculous in the show, but when you look at our current political situation globally, you go, it hasn't changed for 1,000 years.
No. It's like Biden
exactly
crime family, Kushner crime family. It's not. I mean, the Kushner stuff is straight up Sopranos level, mafia style.
An interesting book. We can throw it up here real quick. You recommended this to me. Is it Blood Oil? I have it on my table over here. A Blood and Oil.
Yeah.
And
Blood and Oil.
It's about MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, who is the current de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. And there's this whole part about how Jared Kushner, while he was working with Trump on his first presidency, was over there in Saudi Arabia making all these deals. And the reason I bring that up is just to prove or point out that Kushner, who may not seem very important globally or especially in the U.S.,
very important,
very important. And Kushner, who's much younger than the average, say, boomer politician in the U.S., was able to build a rapport with MBS in Saudi Arabia back in 2016 through 2020, which was very interesting. And I still think there's more to come with that, meaning the next 4 years will be interesting to see what relationships get reignited, which end, and how things shift. One last thing I want to mention is that the poly market odds for Biden pardoning his son were like 27%. And so if you had betted that he was going to pardon him, great odds. You made a lot of money. So I think this is one example. Poly market's been really accurate in a lot of different bets. But there's a current bet right now you can look at right now. And that's if Biden will pardon Fauci. And I believe last time I looked is at 9%. So there's a 9% possibility. So if you win that bet, it's what, a 91%. I don't know the odds there. Yeah. You make a lot of money. I'm not betting. I have no idea what's going to happen there, but I do think it's an interesting statistic.
9 to
people
1.
aren't paying attention. Yeah, exactly. 9
to 1. That is interesting. That is an interesting bet. There's a lot of poly market is an interesting place because you could go. I think you have to use a VPN, right? You're not technically supposed to be able to do it from the US, but you can make some money on poly market. People are making a lot of money. There's a lot of liquidity going on. Let's go to the last one. Run through. So Kash Patel was another Trump appointee appointed to run the FBI. And I'm going to read kind of well, actually, you know what? We'll play the clip of him talking about what he would do to the FBI Hoover building and how he would approach it.
The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big. And the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and rapists and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here?
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. He's a guy who's getting a lot of pushback, but also he's extremely polarizing. He's got a lot of support because people are saying this guy is going to be the absolute best guy to go into the FBI and mix things up. And he's talked a lot about declassification and what he wants to do to create more transparency. Cody, what do you know about Kash, and how are you excited or not excited about him taking over to run the FBI?
I'm absolutely excited. I think this is what people voted for, right? People voted for, I don't want to say mixing up the government, but at least having some sort of transparency.
They voted to drain the swamp. That's what they
here's the guy. There's another funny meme of Vivek next to Kash, and Vivek's like this cleaned up, like polished dude, and he speaks perfectly. And then you got Kash who just like says stuff that you're like, whoa, this is really uncomfortable. And he's like, almost like he's the hitman, and then Vivek's like the
sales guy.
Yeah,
it was like the guy who sells it, and then the implementer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I think overall this will be good. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe there's going to be so much friction with Kash and with the people who are within the FBI that there's going to be problems, but isn't that what people want? People want to know what happened with the JFK files. This guy's read the entire file. They want to know what happened with 9/11 and all the funny business with the Pentagon money that disappeared and all the after investigations with the Saudis.
Yeah.
That guy's read all of it. He can't talk about it because he's got the security clearance that he would be, violating. But if he can get in there and make a lot of this stuff public, I think it would air out a lot of dirty laundry for the U.S. It's going to be uncomfortable, but like there's some bad secrets the U.S. has that need to be exposed and cleaned up, and we need to like acknowledge what's going on.
It does feel like it should be bipartisan to have more transparency around these organizations. One of the challenges is, I think like 94% of Washington, D.C. voted for Biden. So it's very partisan. And that whole area is extremely partisan. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's interesting. He's got I don't know if you've seen this. He's got a $25 million lawsuit going with Politico right now for defamation for how they portrayed him, I think in like 2019. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the people on the left say he's like a Trump loyalist and he's just going to create this partisan FBI. But my argument there is that it feels like it's already pretty partisan, and I could be totally off. But when you think about the voting percentage in DC, who's voting for Biden, the establishment kind of quote deep state group, it seems like it should be a bipartisan thing, that there should be more transparency, more efficiency. I mean, I saw Bernie came out and endorsed what Elon was doing and said, "Hey, this is great for the country. He's right." And I think Bernie is a guy that's got a lot of conviction. He's a free thinker, and he's taking the right approach, which is just because Donald Trump is doing something doesn't mean it's wrong. Right.
Yep.
And some things are going to be wrong. I think appointing Linda McMahon as the head of Department of Education, I'm not a fan of that. Doesn't seem like a smart decision to me. Sending Kushner's dad to France, not a fan of that. But there are other things that I do think are good, and that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we shall see what happens over the next 4 years, but I think this is what people voted for. This is what people want, is this transparency and at least some sort of swing of the pendulum back the other way to this standard we've had. One quick prediction I have, and I don't really know how to play this as an investor, but you mentioned the lawsuit that Kash has against Politico. What would you say for 20 million? I haven't seen
20 or 25 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know numerous people have huge lawsuits against a bunch of different a bunch of different media outlets, and I won't go down the list. I mean, there's probably dozens. I think some of these lawsuits are going to go through, and I think some of these media companies are going to be in deep, deep trouble. And what happened, I believe, is that a lot of the media, held on to these people, whether they're in politics or they're foreign politicians, and they drug them through the mud for the past 4 years. Some of it is probably like opinion, like, okay, you can go through the mud, but the media went too far and they exaggerate a lot of stuff and they just lied about a lot of things. And these lawsuits aren't necessarily about, hey, you made me look bad. These lawsuits are about lies, about specific things that were not true that the media ran with. And I think once these lawsuits get some traction, there's going to be some media companies in some big time trouble here. They're going to owe some serious money. And again, this is probably the pendulum swinging back far the other way.
I think some of them will get bought as well because of that. They get bought out, and
that's what I'm saying.
New owners, and yeah.
For an investment perspective, like there's actually probably some assets that will go on fire sales. There's still probably relatively good brand value in the long run, even though they're getting going through lawsuits. But in the long run, it might be an opportunity for media companies to pick up assets for pennies on the dollar, and any media, let's say like umbrellas, for investors to start looking at, might be an interesting play over the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely an interesting time right now. There's so much change, and ultimately, I'm pretty positive and pretty excited. Things are continuing to kind of move, and it feels like markets are going well. There's lots of changes happening, but overall, I am pretty positive on what is going on in the U.S. I think it's a great time to continue to build, and it's a time to build, man. It's time to build. So it's exciting.
Hell yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you guys have not yet done it, go write us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and send our show to somebody else you like, who you think would like it. Just text it. That would be the best way to support us. We're trying to grow the show. We love you tuning in every week. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode.